Hi there, and welcome to Session 9 of What the Cluck, a podcast devoted to raising chickens for fun and self-sufficiency. Stay tuned while we go in depth about egg production during winter and what you can do to keep your hens laying throughout the cold, dark days. That sounds pretty ominous, doesn't it? But I promise we'll have fun in this episode, so stick with me. Hi, this is Maya from Frugal Chicken, and welcome to Session 9 of What the Cluck, a podcast devoted to keeping chickens for fun and self-sufficiency. Now, in this episode, we'll talk about keeping your hens laying through winter, and since mine have dropped off production, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. Now, there's many reasons why a hen can drop off production in the winter, and we'll look at reasons why that happens, both biological and environmental, and what you can do about it. Some people like to give their hens the winter off, or let nature do its thing and go with the flow as their hens naturally drop egg production in the winter. Now, I'd like to be kept in omelets year-round. That's just how I am. So I try to keep mine producing eggs in the winter. We have about 30 hens, and right now we're maybe getting 3 or 4 eggs a day, which really stinks. The biggest reason hens stop laying in the winter is because the days get shorter, and biologically, that's a normal thing for your chickens. Egg production is triggered by light, specifically by the pituitary gland and the amount of light that is affecting the pituitary gland. And since shorter days mean less light, it triggers the pituitary gland to stop producing hormones, which are what commence egg production. So chickens need about 14 hours per day to keep laying their eggs. Now, this isn't to say every hen on the face of the planet needs 14 hours, and we've even bred chickens that will keep laying throughout shorter days, such as production reds, and that's one reason I'm a big fan of production reds. But generally speaking, most chickens need 14 hours or so of light in order to lay eggs consistently. Now, speaking evolutionarily here, during winter, more energy is needed to keep the hen alive during the winter, and chicks are less likely to survive in the winter because chicks have a harder time maintaining their own body temperature until they feather out, so there's less evolutionary value in producing eggs during the winter. So from that angle, it makes sense that hens don't lay during that time. Now, for people, this stinks, obviously, because we have to work to keep egg production up, or just simply go without eggs. But, you can't stop nature. So what does that mean? It means that we just supplement the light that chickens get with artificial light. So we add in, lamps, battery-powered lamps, stuff like that, to give hens the extra light that they need in order to keep laying. In our coop, we use battery-powered lamps, and the thing to keep in mind is to use a strong light. So when we first started putting lamps in the coop, the lamps just didn't emit enough light, and it was just sort of useless. So you don't need to blind your hens or anything, but just using like a small flashlight or like a small LED flashlight, in my experience, it doesn't work. So we use battery operated lanterns, which shed enough light, but not so much that it's like overwhelming. If you're lucky enough to have electric lights in your coop, you can use electricity, electric lights, or you can also use solar energy. That's another option if you are off grid. And in fact, we're looking at getting some solar panels for our coop this winter, but for now we're just using battery-powered lanterns. I advise you to skip infrared heat lamps, that's the red light bulbs. When it comes to the risk compared to the benefits, in my opinion, the risks are way too high. I say it a lot, but I mean it. Those heat lamps get really, really, really hot, and all it takes is a hen knocking it down, and you might lose your whole flock in your coop to a fire. And for our purposes with making sure that your hens lay throughout the winter, those infrared lights really aren't necessary. So putting a light in the coop is the top way to keep your hens laying throughout winter, but let's talk about some other things you can do that are really just as important. So the next thing to look at is molting. Are your chickens molting or aren't they? If you don't know what molting is, when hens molt, they're losing one set of feathers and replacing them with new ones. This can take a couple months, and right now we have a few hens that are on our homestead that are molting, and these hens aren't producing eggs. Now, when a hen molts, her body naturally puts all of its energy into producing new feathers, hence the drop in egg production. This generally happens in the fall and in early winter after your hen's first year, usually when she's about 18 months old, although I do have one that is 12 months old that started molting. And it's pretty convenient that they do it in winter when egg production naturally drops too. It would kind of stink if they did it in the spring when they're supposed to be, producing eggs, so it's convenient that they do it in the winter. Now, there's really nothing you can or should do to speed up molting. I know in factory farming with chickens, they try to speed it up, but you really shouldn't be doing anything to speed it up. It's a natural process, but one thing that you can do that might help to feed your hens is give her extra protein. so her body can redirect extra energy into producing eggs. So if you have a hen that's molting, you can try a 22% commercial feed or something with a lot of protein in it, such as like wheat fodder or mealworms that are both alive or freeze dried to fill her up with extra protein. If you like to feed eggs to your chickens, eggs is another thing you can give them. So now the third thing that you can do in the winter to keep your hens laying eggs is making sure that they get enough to eat, especially if your hens are used to foraging. During the cooler weather, foraging obviously gets harder, and as the winter turns cooler, they'll start using more nutrients and energy from whatever they're eating to keep warm. So if they get too cold, they're going to take all of that energy and put it to keeping warm instead of producing eggs. So it's really important in cool weather to make sure that they're getting enough to eat. And if your hens will be cooped up all winter, or if there's a lot of snow and they don't want to leave their coop, you'll need to watch how much they are eating and increase what you're offering so that they have enough energy to make eggs. And when I give this advice, I'm assuming that you're also providing a supplementary light to promote egg production, because the bottom line is that without the supplementary light, most chickens won't lay. But making sure that they have enough to eat and everything is also very important. You can simply feed more of your hens regular ration or supplement with mealworms if you don't already feed them. If it's going to be a cold night, you can offer corn, but as a consistent way to increase their feed, I don't suggest feeding corn. You're better off offering just more of what they already normally eat and making sure that they're getting enough protein and calcium. Now, if you're still concerned that they might not be getting enough nutrients, or if you just want to cover your butt, you can offer supplementary vitamins using something like NutriDrench, which you can put in their water, and I'll actually put a link in the show notes where you can buy NutriDrench. To help keep your hens laying throughout the winter, you should also make sure that they're getting enough calcium, and this is really important. Winter is an especially important time to offer oyster shells as a calcium supplement. You should do it all year round, but winter is especially an important time to do it. Just offer it separately in a bowl or a dish. Don't mix it with their feed, but offer it separately so they can take it as they need it. Without the calcium supplement, hens will start to draw calcium from their own bones, which you don't want. Now, they'll start to draw the calcium from their own bones if they're not getting enough calcium from their diet. It's not to say that if you don't offer oyster shells, they will draw, calcium from their bones, but if they don't get enough calcium in their diet, it will start to come from their own body. So offer the oyster shells as a supplement and let them, eat at it as they need it. If there's any chance her diet doesn't provide enough calcium, offering the oyster shells will help her produce hard eggshells throughout the winter as well. If you have any concerns about whether your chickens are getting the right diet or are deficient in anything, you can always take it to a vet to have blood pulled to double check. But as long as you're sticking to a recommended diet and feeding enough, your chickens should be okay. But just remember, again, that I'm not a vet, and so this is just a public service announcement. If you have any concerns about your chickens not getting the right amount of nutrients, to have a vet pull some blood and double check it. Now, let's just talk about scratch for a minute. I think you should avoid scratch at all costs, especially commercial scratch. If you make it from home and it has enough protein, that's one thing. But commercial scratch, just save your money, don't buy it. You're better off offering more of their regular feed or offering some other tasty treat, and we'll talk about a couple boredom busters that I use with my own chickens in a minute. Now, something else to consider that can shut down egg production in winter, even if you do everything else right, is stress. And I don't just mean the stress of cold, although common experience tells us that when a hen's body is stressed, she's less likely to lay. So when it's very hot or very cold, she is less likely to lay because her body is, having a little bit more stress. But I'm talking about environmental stresses that can be brought on by winter and confinement. Now, as it gets colder, you might choose to keep your hens in the coop more often, or more often when there's a lot of snow. Hens will choose to stay in the coop rather than brave the elements, and this can lead to some environmental stresses, especially if they're used to getting out and about a lot. So it becomes a classic issue of overcrowding, which can lead to a drop in egg production and behaviors like egg eating, picking at each other, fighting, that sort of thing are classic issues of overcrowding. So when there's snow everywhere and they don't want to go inside and they don't lay eggs, what are you going to do? Well, here's what we do. In the past, we put straw on the ground in the run, and we don't use shavings in this situation because shavings absorb water very well and it can become a boggy mess in the run very quickly. So we use straw, which gives them a nice clean place to walk and a little bit warmer than snow and ice and cold mud and all that stuff. Then we just simply make them go outside and we offer them treats like mealworms. Pumpkin is another favorite. And you can offer them anything that they really go nuts for and just make them spend time outside while still being humane and not forcing them to step on cold ice if they don't want to. But the situation with them being in the coop too much really becomes one of weighing the risk and the benefits. So looking at the risk-benefit ratio, which is to say if they stay inside, what kind of behavioral or even nutritional issues will they develop? If they're in the coop for long periods of time without sunlight, vitamin D absorption becomes an issue, which then causes problems with calcium absorption. So looking at the risks versus the benefits of making them go outside for a couple hours. And when I say all this, I'm assuming that you aren't talking about making them go outside in like negative 30-degree weather Fahrenheit. I'm not talking about that 30-mile-an-hour gust types of wind type of weather. I wouldn't have them go outside in that case. I'd wait for a better day, or even if that's every day where you live, I'd consider building them an indoor run like a greenhouse or something. But in reasonable winter weather, there's no harm in making them go outside for a couple hours, and it will only benefit them and avoid cabin fever. So if it's 30 degrees outside and it's sunny, it's perfectly fine to make them go outside and avoid some of the cabin fever and behavioral issues that they can get from being cooped up all the time. Now, if your chickens are used to free ranging, then being confined in a coop is going to be stressful for them. Now, another option is to feed extra food, or what I like to call boredom busters, and you can find a lot of examples out there on the internet. Another thing you can do is move perches around a lot to give them some sort of interesting environmental things to think about. Something mine love are pumpkins, and literally what I do is I just break it in half and let them peck out the flesh and enjoy that for a few hours. We have about 30 chickens in our coop, and it takes them about a few hours to get through it all. If you can't find pumpkins in your area, you can offer them squash or other gourds. And the nice thing is that since the flesh is a little bit tougher in pumpkins and squash, it can take them some time to get through it. They get extra food, and they also love the seeds. Now, in my experience, the squash and the pumpkin keep them occupied longer than like lettuce or cabbage, for example, which in the dead of winter when they're bored is always a good thing. Giving them pumpkin and something that takes them a little bit longer to get through also keeps them moving around, which helps them keep their body temperature up. So with your flock, you can use some of these ideas to help reduce their stress levels, or you can always come up with your own to keep your flock occupied during colder days of the year when they might not want to go outside and play. And the less stress that they have, the more likely they are to keep laying throughout the winter, obviously. Now for fun, I'll also put a video in the show notes that's a really good animation showing how a hen lays an egg and the journey that the egg goes on throughout her body. It starts off at the ovaries, and it shows how the albumin is added and how the eggshell is added until it finally is laid. This video has been passed around Facebook a lot, and it's a really interesting and informative video to educate yourself on how exactly your hens produce those eggs every day. So I hope this podcast gives you some ideas to help you keep your hens laying when they naturally want to stop. Making sure that they get enough to eat, get enough light, which really is the most important thing here, and have low levels of stress will help you keep your hens laying eggs, and I've personally had success with these ideas. Of course, if you don't want your hens to keep laying eggs throughout the winter, if you want to go with the flow, that's fine too. As always, feel free to contact me with any comments or questions, and be sure to check out chicken-related articles on my blog, thefrugalchicken.com. If you like this podcast, please feel free to give it a review and ratings in iTunes. I would definitely appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe to What the Cluck on iTunes so you don't miss an episode. Also be sure to subscribe to the Frugal Chicken YouTube channel for chicken and homesteading videos. I do update it often, and subscribing means you'll never miss a video. If you haven't checked out my new chicken nutrition course, Feeding Your Hens Right, which comes out in January, head over to feedingyourhensright.com, that's all one word, feedingyourhensright.com, to take a look. Thanks for listening to this episode of What the Cluck, and I'll see you next time.